Serious, people of Reddit who live in San Francisco where $100,000 a year is considered low income, and work retail, convenience store, Starbucks type jobs. How do you survive? When I moved there in 2004 rent wasn't that bad, and as a 20-something I had fun doing the roommate thing. My first place was in Chinatown in a 3-bedroom where I only met the landlord before I moved in, and each bedroom had a lock on the door. Also it was on a street with a streetcar trolley line so the room would vibrate when the trolley started at 5 AM. After that it was a succession of $500 700 rooms for a few years. My now wife and I got tired of living with roommates once we hit our mid-30s and had our own 1BD near the ocean for a few years. Rent there was $2,400 which would be a steal today. I'm sure the current tenant is paying at least $3,000 now. After a few years of paying almost $30,000 a year in rent we said what the frick are we doing now? We live in Nova Scotia while we both go back to school and our cost of living is probably a fifth of what we were paying the last few years in the city. I was an AmeriCorps member living in San Francisco and I made under minimum wage, perhaps $450 every 2 weeks. I always had at least 3 roommates. Live off of a website called SF Fun Cheap. It lists free and cheap events. Collected SSISSDI, another $700 a month, and read for fun. I read maybe 300 books because it was a huge part of my time. Forcing someone to live in SF to do an AmeriCorps job is criminal. Lived there a couple of years ago, left for the very reason you are asking the question about. I ran a retail medical office. I moved out of my place I couldn't afford and lived in the office. I would shower at a gym down the road and park my car at some apartments nearby and walk about 3-4 miles to the office. Car had been stolen in front of my office in the first couple of weeks I was there and didn't want security seeing it. I would go out to eat and walk around till the cleaners were gone and set up my gaming computer in the back office. After the cleaners left I would come in through the back office door and roll out a mattress pad I hid in a file cabinet and bring my duffel bag of clothes. I would play and sleep and then wake up before my assistant got there and pack up my bed, get dressed and act like I came in early and make some oatmeal in the microwave. Weekends were amazing as they didn't clean this days. Got to flu while living there and had the cleaners come in at weird times and I would sneak my stuff into a closet and lock it while hiding until they left. Such a good 6 months but crazy. But also worked 3 jobs at the time to survive. Once I moved into my office just worked 2 because I liked the other job and was more fun and gave me something to do on the weekends. When I first moved to SF there were very few places I could afford. One was a room in Oakland for 3 months in a Chinese family home that said to be quiet at all hours and never have anyone over for $800 mo. I would then have to pay $200 mo on public transportation to SF. That takes 30-40 minutes. The other was a bunk bed situation with 2 other people in Daly City, which was actually not too bad at $850. Another I looked at was a closet behind a kitchen in downtown SF with no electricity that could only fit a full-size bed for $700, which I was really tempted to get for some privacy after spending every moment around other people. But there were already several people looking at it and got it before me. I used my savings from my old job before I moved as a barista and I was spending nearly my whole monthly paycheck from then to get by. I bought cheap pasta or deli meats on sale to eat and treated myself max twice a month at Sushirito or something. I never worked a retail job in SF but I imagine they do the same. By living in the same rent-controlled apartment since 1990, I don't work at Starbucks or a regular retail job. I work for myself and make about $70,000 a year, but I pay only $900 for a 1-bedroom apartment in the Tender Knob, the cusp of Nob Hill, end of Tenderloin North, per month. Same apartment goes for $3,300. My job provides on-site employee housing, both as an employee perk and a business necessity. The downside is that I have to live at work. Most service workers probably aren't living inside the city proper, instead living in places like the East Bay, Oakland, or Daly City. Everyone I know who works those kinds of jobs is only one worker in a family group of people who live together. Usually a kid or young adult still living at home, or a spouse working for extra money when someone else is the real breadwinner. One girl I know lives in a house with 6 other people and shares a bedroom with 2 of them. just to have affordable rent that she can manage on a Starbucks income. I don't live in San Francisco anymore, but still have lots of connections there. It's pretty impossible to just move the area as a low-wage earner. Everyone who works low-pay service jobs in San Fran needs to move out all at the same time, and then laugh at the rich, who control the place, lose their minds at not being able to buy non-expired food and such. Somehow convinced my employer to move me to a Midwest office with same pay, and let me tell you, I live good out here. Rented a small house on a lake and bought a new car. It was the weirdest 6 months of my life, and in hindsight a funny story to tell. I had all sorts of craziness, but now life is good and relax. IMHO other people can keep the Bay Area. Weather was nice in winter, blistering hot in the summer as I was in Pleasanton and Fremont. Most of all, same salary goes so much further out here. Best decision I made was leaving for my mental health and my finances. I finally have money in retirement too. Seeing all these stories are insane. My wife and I make about $130k a year combined. We own a decent sized house, 1,450 square featuring in a small neighborhood, and both have cars that are paid off. I can't imagine paying just as much on our mortgage to live in what amounts to a large walk-in closet with a toilet and still having to worry about other expenses. My dad works out in the Bay, lives in his van during the work week, then comes home to the greater Sacramento area on weekends. I've been sworn to never tell my stepmom that he's staying in his van and not in a series of cheap motel rooms. Early in my career I decided I would not work in a community I could not afford to live in. All communities need nurses, firefighters and middle-class public servants. Communities also need lower-income people too. Everyone contributes to the community and should be able to live in it. I understand some neighborhoods are out of reach, but it should never be the entire city. Long commutes freaking suck. After having a long commute for a few years office relocating across town, I decided that I never wanted to deal with a long commute again. I'll pay more for housing or downgrade before I'll deal with a long, crappy commute again. This whole thread is really making me appreciate my low cost of living area. I have a 2,000 square feet log home on 20 private, wooded acres for $125k. I'll take it. I'm dating a guy who used to live there, and he said one time he had 8 roommates in one house sharing one bathroom. Everyone had a pee bottle in their room to pee in if the bathroom was occupied, which it always was. Not from San Francisco's, but a similar call area. Basically everyone lives with family forever. My in-laws have a house they're renting out to family, and like 5 different families that are all related live together and split the costs. It's basically one family room. My stepdad works multiple jobs, one FT and one PT, and basically drives a hand-me-down truck. The crazy thing is, if he made his salary for his one FT job where I live now, he'd be super comfortable. My mom, she and stepdad divorced, has to move back in with my grandma. That's basically it, living with family and multiple jobs. They don't live in SF. Or if they do, it's with either a lot of roommates or with their family. I lived in a studio apartment by myself, and I was paying $2,500 a month. It was in the middle of the Tenderloin, so I had to step through oceans of human crap to get to my apartment door, and I was lucky if a passed out homeless person wasn't blocking it. I was usually pretty broke before I got that apartment, which took months. I was living out of hostels and hotels, lugging around a duffel bag, sometimes being forced to drag it to work with all of my possessions in it. It was really scary, and I sometimes didn't know where I was going to sleep. My friend who I was crashing with was supposed to be in Korea for the month, but came back early and kicked me out during what she called Bonnerstorms, which was when she wanted to bring a guy home. I thought I was going to really enjoy SF, but it ended up not being a pleasant experience. The worst part is that my favorite thing to do in the world is just sitting on a patio and drinking a beer, but there are almost no patios in SF, and if a bar does have one, it's a tiny cage space, and people will still hit you up for money over and over, asking you roll up money and slip it through the cage. Being constantly asked for money and touched by people and never being alone really wore on me. I always thought I was a city person, and I'm clearly not. Now I live in a clean city, in a 3-bedroom house with my girlfriend that's half as much as that studio, and I have a patio to drink on right beside an enormous park where people don't bother me, and can be in the woods or the desert or up in the mountains or skiing or hiking or swimming within 20 minutes in any direction. I'm much happier. It's tough. I live in Vancouver and make $75K. They are trying to evict me out of my 40-year-old apartment building so they can raise the rent to $2,100. $75K sounds good, but I'd have to save an entire year's pay just to make a down payment on an apartment within an hour of work. Also live in Vancouver. My husband and I are teachers and live in a 1-bedroom apartment with our 2 young kids. We own our apartment but can't afford to upgrade yet. I daydream constantly of moving but hated growing up in a small town and want more opportunities for my kids. My friend lived there for 2 years. She lived with 3 other people and worked 2 serving bartender jobs. She's moving to San Diego because it's too expensive and not worth it. San Diego isn't much better. There are a lot of SF natives where their parents own the property they live in. My parents have 2 properties, 1 rent-controlled co-op. My LOL sister and her husband pay a reasonable rent, not what my parents would get on the current market. My BF and I live in a 2-bedroom townhouse on his uncle's property. We pay way less than market. We also rent out the extra bedroom, so my rent share and my BFS is an unheard of less than $500 together. So if you're lucky enough to have family that owns property in the Bay Area and they aren't money hungry, you survive by that. Your sister seems pretty funny. I have lived here since 2011 and am a full-time nanny. I make about $70,000 per year gross. I was a broke college student when I moved here 7 years ago, but I was only paying $900 for a studio in the outer Sunset. Split with a boyfriend. I now pay $1,900 for a studio in Pacific Heights, which is actually a steal, believe it or not. I live somewhat paycheck to paycheck but am able to survive and have fun, while still being able to put a little into my savings every once in a while. This is my favorite city on earth, but I'm planning to relocate to Portland, or at the end of this year because it's just becoming too expensive. Work as a server or a food runner. High minimum wage and excellent nightly tips at a nicer restaurant make for a comfortable income, and you can rent a place for under $2,000 a month. Also, there's so many restaurants but good staff is hard to come by, so if you are good at your job you will always be in demand. Long term it's not sustainable and the work is soul sucking. That's why I left, so I could find an actual career. You don't want to be that 40-year-old server. Just south of SF. I live in the same Mexican ghetto since I was a kid. Could never afford a house in a nicer area. Plus I work almost every weekend. I'm an infrastructure engineer that used to live in San Francisco. I found a Bay Area job that would pay SF dollars for remote work. I moved away as quickly as I could. This is the smartest comment on this post so far. I think it's important to mention so people aren't confused. That's $100K for a family of 4 if I remember correctly. For individuals it's still at around $60-70K I think. It's $117 for families of 4 and $82 for a single adult. The 100,000 mark is for families. If you made $100,000 a year in the Bay Area and were single with no children, you could find a nice place. I guess that depends on your lifestyle choices though. Had a friend turn down a job at Google right out of college cause he could not afford to bring the wife and kids. Single friend had no issue. It's burned hard. I had to start working 2 jobs just to make rent, and my rent is really cheap, about $1,000 per month. Don't even get me started on food, drinks and transportation. Lived in Santa Cruz. Pretty comparable rate of living. My fiancé and I were living in a converted studio hair salon. From 9-5 every weekday we had to store all of our stuff in a tiny loft space and clean the entire place from top to bottom. Business standard clean. And then leave. We had to pay $700 a month in rent for a place that we couldn't even stay at during the day. Usually it was stories like this. I'm the 12th student crammed into this 3-bedroom house and I pay $600 a month to live in a closet. I just want to say, for all those still languishing in San Francisco and the greater Bay Area, there is a lot of organizations doing good work to try to solve the current housing crisis. There is currently a campaign around Prop 10 to repeal Costa-Hawkins, the law that restricts rent control. Also, there are organizations that are trying to put together tenant unions, like the San Francisco Tenant Union, to challenge the power of the landlords. Rent levels are not the problem. The housing supply is ridiculously small compared to demand. Look at the Manhattan skyline and compare it to Palo Alto. You live with your parents until it makes you dead inside. You give up independence, or even just the dignity of being treated like an adult just for a roof over your head. You save up to move out of state whenever possible, but a single unexpected cost can sink your finances for 3 months or more. Basically, proper adulthood gets put on hold indefinitely for financial reasons. Never appreciated living with my parents, who I actually like and generally leave me alone more than I do after reading your comment. Seeing friends work these retail roles. They almost always live in Oakland, just a 10-minute BART ride away, and almost never actually live in SF. It's possible to make it work on a $35K yearly salary. You just have to know where to look to find that kind of work. Not having a car is key, considering public transport is pretty okay around the city. Nowadays there are tons of entry-level customer support roles at tech companies that start you off at $20 HR. And plenty more that hire you for $15K a year more. That's the only way I've found to make it work to live in the Bay Area. When I first moved to the city, I worked at a Pete's and lived in SROs while we looked for an apartment. Finally found one for 3 of us in a 2-bedroom. I slept on a futon, which was also the living room couch. I hung a curtain. Made it real tough when I got a girlfriend. I also had a dog, a Shar-Pei, with associated costs. When she died a week before Christmas, vet bills basically wiped me out for a month. I wouldn't have made it without the support of my roommate and my then girlfriend. But I was 40 hours a week and we knew someone with a Costco card, so we could buy groceries in bulk. We also made very good friends with our bartenders, so we got a lot of drinks for free. I got a better job for several years. That was nice. Then I got fired and had to go back to Pete's. I was engaged, different girl, living with her. She had a much better job and made a lot more money, but I have this pride issue and insisted on paying my half of the rent. I ended up taking a promotion I didn't want because it got me guaranteed 40 hours. Benefits included at Pete's if you're 20+ week, pretty good, and a raise. When I worked there the first time, I developed a bunch of coffee knowledge and a few resources to help with that. Thus, when I got promoted, I became the highest paid shift lead in San Francisco because I was that dang good at my job. $16 plus HR plus $2.50 HR in tips. I basically lived off tips day to day and used paycheck for rent and bills. You end up making most of your meals at home, not eating out a lot, drinking at home instead of at the bar. I quit smoking weed. I walked to work and didn't get a bus pass, so I eliminated a lot of the expenses around my car, tickets, gas. I don't go cross bay much, so tolls are infrequent. Basically, I didn't explore the city too often, and I spent a lot of time with Netflix. We engaged in free activities, like flying kites or walking around Golden Gate Park. My wife also had her museum badge. We met while both working at a science museum. Now I work at the other one, so we get into lots of local attractions for free. I should also mention that because of good planning by our parents and excellent use of scholarships, neither of us has student loans. We are aware how rare that is and how privileged it makes us. I live in the Richmond district in a 1BR for $2,200 a month for 2 people. It's not rent controlled. Next month we have to start paying $35 a month more. And I've now gotten a better job with better pay that doesn't require 4 AM alarms. My wife also got a new job with a huge raise, and that's nice. We're moving up. But despite the horror stories you'll always read in these threads, it can be done. Even starting at SF minimum wage. If you know your crap and are willing to learn your crap, you can get promotions and raises and make enough to get by, even to live, maybe not super comfortably, but enough to fit solidly in the lower middle class, and it's not that bad. I'm a bartender. I lucked the frick out by moving here 10 years ago and becoming good friends with my landlord. I've been with the same landlord for all of those 10 years in 2 separate apartments, and he's now getting pretty advanced in years. I don't honestly think he remembers much about our original agreement and just keeps things status quo. My landlord is one of the most incredible people on the planet, and I know that I am unbelievably lucky in this regard. The thing is though, even though I can stay here and survive right now, I don't have enough to leave. I'm stuck at the mercy of this wonderful, elderly human. If something were to change tomorrow, I'd literally be homeless. The honest truth is that most people that work those jobs are either students or young adults living with their parents, have a spouse or family member that is the breadwinner, or they don't actually live in the city and just commute 1.5 hours each way and pay $600 more on rent. Sometimes people find affordable housing or live in their cars, but that is much less common. It really isn't that hard of a place to work in if you don't mind being on the road for a long period of time. Is this really a thing? Like $100,000 a year? Low income? That's high rolling around here. South Carolina, making $18 an hour is good pay and you may be lucky to have benefits. I rent a room with 4 other people in a 4-bedroom house and have free hobbies such as surfing and hiking. I work restaurant jobs so I don't have to shop, cook or do dishes, and I eat well most nights. I am a student at SFSU studying mechanical engineering. I go to school full time and I work for the school about 20 hours a week maximum. I share a room where we both pay $750. The entire 2-bedroom house costs almost $3,000 per month. When it comes down to it, there's ridiculously low wiggle room. Adding working out to the whole schedule, then I have about 2 hours to myself maximum per day. Luckily I have 3 roommates that all struggle and work their asses off, which motivates me a ton. Just going to finish my degree and get the frick out. At this point we survive by not getting kicked out of our apartment. Just Ray signed a lease. They wanted to increase $200 to over $2,500 and additional power, water, sewer, garbage, water heating, and pest control for a 625 SQFT 1-bedroom, but since I am kind to staff, friendly, bring them baked goods and treats, don't make a fuss, and they love my dog, the staff was able to drop the increase to only $67. Maybe 20 months in the future we'll have enough to make a down payment on an overpriced studio condo so we can start building equity. TT. Holy cow. Huntsville, a nice neighborhood house at 2,400 square foot on nearly an acre for $1,600 a month. I knew some people who did it 10-15 years ago. Basically, they lived in low-rent apartments on Treasure Island. It's a mostly artificial island, former Navy base connected to San Francisco, and technically part of the city via the Bay Bridge. Treasure Island is kind of miserable place to live because there were, I still assume, but haven't been back, no stores or anything really on it, so to get even a gallon of milk you'd have to take the bus into the city proper. Today in the town on the peninsula where I grew up in the 50s 70s, there is not one house under $1 million. The first house my dad bought now has a Zillow estimate of $1.80 million. No way could I even remotely afford to live there now. Born and raised in the SF Bay Area, I've been insanely fortunate that I haven't been laid off since working full time. But if I ever was out of work, I wouldn't be able to afford to live here. I don't even live in SF. I live further down the peninsula. I live with my BF and we split a $3.40 KMO rent for a 1BDBR, 800 SQFT apartment. I know a ton of friends who have roommates. They either rent a house, like 5+ people living in it splitting 5-6 KMO, or 2-bedroom apartment with like 3 people in it. Well, I work retail and live in SF, in the Mission District if it matters. I've been in the same app since 2010 and my rent is still around $2,000 a month for a 1-bedroom with an office. I don't own a car but my wife does. We have no kids, in our 40s, and are making combined $129K a year. We live very simply but we have enough to take an overseas vacation each year. My wife is going to grad school so that will put off our student loan payments for a while also. Our bills each month total about $4,000. For car, rent, credit cards, etc. We may have a nasty roach problem, but they won't burn down the building. It may not be the safest area either, but the tech flick sticks are gentrifying the place pretty good, so the area is a lot safer. I can go into more detail if you want to know. I will say that it sucks when your better off friends are going out to some fancy place each week and you can only buy the kids meals. I will also say that we are lucky with rent control, but in the work I do, think Macy's, if I was to live anywhere else in the country, my pay would be cut in half because of the cost of living base pay bulls that is assumed to be appropriate. Heck, even in Chicago I'd be making $30k less a year. I'm fine where I am, thank you. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.